He didn't kick down the door. He didn't smash a window. He simply unlocked it. Stepping across a threshold he no longer had a right to cross. Standing in the doorway of his ex-girlfriend's apartment, 27-year-old James Ritenour held up a single key, a small metal object that was once a symbol of trust. "I bet you forgot I had this key," he said, his voice cutting through the late-night quiet. Moments later, the apartment filled with the deafening sound of gunfire. How does a love story become a ghost story? And how does a relationship end with a key, a cold-blooded betrayal, and a brutal double shooting just feet away from two sleeping children? For 29-year-old Alexis Douglas, the relationship was over. She had closed that chapter of her life and was finally looking toward a peaceful future. But for her ex-boyfriend, James Ritenour, her rejection wasn't an ending. For him, the compass of his mind was broken, its needle stuck, pointing only toward her. For Alexis, a vibrant mother of two, his refusal to let go would culminate in a night of unimaginable violence, orchestrated by a man who believed that if he couldn't have her, nobody could. This is the story of how a toxic obsession turned deadly. In Nashville, Tennessee, Alexis Douglas was building a life defined by love and dedication. Her entire world revolved around her two young children, a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, for whom she was determined to create a stable, happy home. To her friends and family, Alexis was a radiant presence, a loving mom who was finally finding her own happiness. She had recently entered a new, healthy relationship and was filled with a sense of hope that had been missing for years. The future looked bright, a welcome dawn after a long and painful storm. But a ghost from her past refused to leave, casting a long and chilling shadow over her newfound peace. That ghost was James Ritenour. Though their romantic relationship was finished, his connection to her had twisted into something possessive and menacing, like an anchor chaining her to the past. While Alexis was taking brave steps forward, Ritenour remained stuck, determined to be a constant, threatening presence in her life. He was a specter she couldn't exorcise, pulling her back into a cycle of fear that he alone controlled. The relationship between Alexis and James Ritenour had been a tumultuous on-and-off affair that consumed nearly 6 years of her life. For those who knew what was happening behind closed doors, it was a nightmare. The union was marked by severe physical and mental abuse, a prison of emotional manipulation that left deep, invisible scars. Alexis had fought for years to break free from his control, and she had finally found the strength to end it for good. She was done with the pain, done with the fear, and ready to reclaim her life. But Ritenour could not, or would not, accept her decision. As Alexis began to heal, his behavior spiraled into a pathological obsession. This type of fixation is sometimes classified as morbid jealousy, a dangerous state where the mind acts like a warped filter, distorting reality until it sees betrayal and conspiracy in every innocent act. It's an all-consuming paranoia that often leads to stalking, harassment, and in the most tragic cases, extreme violence. Ritenour's inability to let go followed a terrifyingly familiar script. Her friends and family reported that he began stalking her, turning her new life into a landscape of constant fear. When she blocked his phone number, he would simply get a new one and resume his relentless campaign of harassment. It was a constant digital siege, an endless stream of messages and calls that were like 1,000 fists pounding on her door, giving her no peace, no sanctuary, and no escape. She had broken up with him, but he refused to disappear.
December 21st, 2020. It was a cold winter evening in Nashville, just 4 days before Christmas. The festive lights of the season offered a stark contrast to the darkness that was about to descend upon the Elm Hill Pike apartment complex. Inside, Alexis Douglas was at home with her new boyfriend, 29-year-old Gene Fernandez. The two were relaxing on the couch, enjoying a quiet moment together. In another room, her two children slept soundly, innocent and unaware of the horror that was about to breach the walls of their home. At approximately 11:45 p.m., the calm was shattered. The front door didn't splinter from a kick. It simply swung open. There stood James Ritenour. In his hand, he held the key Alexis had once given him in trust. In that moment, the key was no longer a symbol of their shared past. It was the instrument of her destruction. He had not forced his way in, he had let himself in, violating the sanctity of her home in the most personal way imaginable. According to Jean Fernandez, the sole survivor of the attack, Ritenour's entrance was chillingly deliberate. He looked at the couple on the couch, a picture of the happy life Alexis was building without him. Then he spoke the words that laid his premeditated plan bare. "I bet you forgot I had this key." Before they could react, he raised a gun and opened fire. The sudden volley of shots was brutal and merciless. When the violence was over, Alexis Douglas, the 29-year-old mother of two, was dead at the scene. Jean Fernandez was grievously wounded, but miraculously he survived. In the next room, her two children slept on, physically unharmed, but now orphaned from their mother by an act of unthinkable jealousy. When Metro Nashville police arrived, they were met with a scene of tragedy and chaos. They found Alexis deceased and Jean Fernandez clinging to life. As paramedics rushed Jean to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, investigators began the urgent task of finding the man responsible. However, in the critical early hours, the investigation's compass pointed in the wrong direction. Based on an initial frantic witness account, police issued warrants for another of Alexis's ex-boyfriends, Samia Boyce Jr., the father of her children. His name and photograph were broadcast across the media, branding an innocent man as a killer.
But detectives soon recalibrated. After bringing Boyce in for questioning, his alibi held firm. It became clear he had been misidentified. On December 21st, police officially withdrew the warrants against him, announcing they were pursuing a new lead. The investigation then zeroed in on James Ritenour. The crucial turning point came from Jean Fernandez. From his hospital bed, his testimony acted as a North Star, guiding police to the truth. Despite his life-threatening injuries, he identified Ritenour as the man who walked through the door and started shooting. When investigators combined this powerful eyewitness account with the history of abuse and harassment, the motive became disturbingly clear. This was the final, violent outburst of a man consumed by a jealous rage. With Ritenour officially named as the prime suspect, a manhunt began. For nearly 8 months, he was a fugitive. Finally, on August 11, 2021, acting on a tip, the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force located Ritenour hiding at a relative's house in Nashville. He was taken into custody without a fight. With James Ritenour apprehended, the long road to justice began. The trial was held in May of 2025, and the prosecution built an ironclad fortress of evidence. They argued this was not a spontaneous crime of passion, but a premeditated execution. Ritenour's use of a key demonstrated he had planned his entry. His chilling taunt, "I bet you forgot I had this key," served as a verbal confession. In the courtroom of Judge Jennifer Smith, the most powerful moments came from Jean Fernandez. He took the stand, faced the man who had tried to kill him, and recounted the horrific events of that night. With unshakable certainty, he pointed directly at James Ritenour, identifying him as the killer. The prosecution meticulously laid out the motive. Ritenour was enraged with jealousy. They detailed the stalking and harassment, painting the picture of a man operating under a terrifyingly common belief among abusers, one that resembles a spoiled child smashing a toy they are forced to share. If he couldn't have her, no one could. The defense was left with little to counter the mountain of evidence. After deliberations, the Davidson County jury returned with a unanimous decision. They found James Ritenour guilty of first-degree premeditated murder for the killing of Alexis Douglas and attempted first-degree murder for the shooting of Jean Fernandez. James Ritenour will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. The guilty verdict brought the legal chapter of this story to a close, but for those who loved Alexis Douglas, the pain will never truly end. Her 2 children now face a future without their mother, their lives forever altered by a single night of senseless violence. Her family and friends are left only with the memories of a vibrant, loving woman whose life was stolen far too soon. Her story is a tragic testament to the lethal danger of obsessive jealousy. The warning signs were all there: the history of abuse, the relentless calls, the stalking, each one a red flag. This case is a heartbreaking reminder that the most profound threats can emerge from the people we once trusted. For Alexis, a simple house key, an object that should have symbolized security, was twisted into the tool of her murder. Her story stands as a painful, indelible example of what happens when obsession is allowed to fester like a poison, corrupting reason and compassion until it destroys everything in its path. If you believe it's important to shed light on these cases, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Your support helps ensure these stories are told and that the victims are never forgotten. And as always, thank you for watching.